The Virgin Queen, Elizabeth I. She married her nation, then birthed a golden age.
On the damp, freezing morning of November 17, 1558, a young woman sat beneath an ancient oak tree in the sprawling grounds of Hatefield House, quietly reading her Greek New Testament. She was 25 years old, effectively a prisoner of the state, and a survivor of a blood-soaked royal court that had already claimed the lives of her mother and several of her closest allies. Suddenly, the sound of galloping hooves broke the autumn silence. A delegation of powerful lords arrived, dismounted, and fell to their knees in the mud. They brought monumental news. Her half-sister, Queen Mary I, was dead.
The young woman reportedly sank to the damp earth and quoted Psalm 118 in Latin, E domino factum est illud, et est mirabile in oculus nostris. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. In that solitary cinematic moment, the precarious life of an illegitimate princess ended, and the 44-year reign of one of history's most formidable political architects began. This was Elizabeth Tudor, the woman who would drag a divided, bankrupt island nation from the edge of civil war and forge it into a burgeoning global power.
Elizabeth I was born on September 7, 1533, at Greenwich Palace in London. English by birth and nationality, she was the last monarch of the formidable House of Tudor, operating in the treacherous arena of 16th-century geopolitics and national governance. Elizabeth remains profoundly influential because her reign, subsequently christened the Elizabethan era, established a moderate Protestant state church, catalyzed an unprecedented cultural renaissance, and laid the early maritime foundations of the British Empire. Ruling as a female monarch in a deeply patriarchal age, she defied relentless pressure to marry. Instead, she brilliantly transformed her status as the Virgin Queen into a tool of diplomatic leverage and domestic propaganda, fundamentally redefining the nature of royal authority. The world Elizabeth she was born into was a theatre of violent instability, engineered by her father, King Henry VIII. Desperate for a male heir, Henry had torn England away from the Catholic Church to marry Elizabeth's mother, the captivating Anne Boleyn. But Elizabeth was not the boy her father craved. When she was just 2 years and 8 months old, her mother was accused of treason and beheaded on May 19, 1536. Instantly, the toddler was declared illegitimate and stripped of the title princess. Despite this brutal demotion, her royal blood guaranteed a rigorous humanist education. Guided by brilliant tutors like Roger Ascham, she demonstrated prodigious intellect. By her early teens, she could speak and write fluently in English, Latin, Greek, French, and Italian. This linguistic training gave her the rhetorical weapons she would later use to dominate parliaments and confound foreign ambassadors. Yet, beneath the academic brilliance lay a profound insecurity. She was a bastardized daughter in a court where the wrong allegiance meant sudden death. Elizabeth's character was forged in the crucible of constant mortal danger. After Henry VIII's death in 1547, her 9-year-old half-brother, Edward VI, took the throne. During this time, the adolescent Elizabeth became entangled in a terrifying scandal with Thomas Seymour, the ambitious husband of her stepmother. Seymour's inappropriate behavior toward the 14-year-old nearly ruined her reputation. When Seymour was executed for treason in 1549, a teenage Elizabeth underwent grueling interrogation. She displayed ice-cold composure, revealing a remarkable ability to mask her emotions, a defensive dissimulation that became her political hallmark. Her ultimate test arrived in 1553, when her fervently Catholic half-sister, Mary I, seized the throne. As Mary sought to forcibly return England to Catholicism, Elizabeth became the natural figurehead for Protestant resistance. In March 1554, following a rebellion, a paranoid Queen Mary ordered the 20-year-old Elizabeth imprisoned in the Tower of London. Passing through Traitor's Gate, Elizabeth expected the headsman's axe. The psychological toll of this 2-month imprisonment taught her the paramount value of caution and the absolute necessity of keeping her true thoughts hidden behind a mask of royal compliance. Elizabeth's transition from a frightened prisoner to the recognized heir was a masterclass in political patience. After her release from the Tower, she was kept under strict house arrest. However, as Queen Mary's reign faltered, plagued by deeply unpopular religious persecutions and a disastrous war with France that cost England the territory of Calais in 1558, the English populace began to look desperately towards the young woman waiting in the wings. Elizabeth played her part flawlessly. She attended Catholic Mass to satisfy her sister, while quietly maintaining back-channel communications with powerful Protestant nobles. She took no unnecessary risks and signed no treasonous documents. By the time Mary lay dying in the autumn of 1558, Elizabeth had already established a shadow government. Her rise to recognition was not an explosive military coup, but a slow, calculated survival that made her the only viable option for a traumatized nation. The undeniable breakthrough of Elizabeth's life was the 1559 religious settlement, enacted mere months after her coronation on January 15, 1559. England was profoundly fractured. Catholic traditionalists and radical Protestant reformers were ready to tear the country apart. Instead of choosing a radical path that would inevitably lead to civil war, the 25-year-old Queen, alongside her indispensable Chief Minister William Cecil, engineered a pragmatic compromise. The Act of Supremacy re-established the Church of England's independence from Rome, but crucially, Elizabeth adopted the title Supreme Governor rather than Supreme Head, a nuanced choice that appeased those who believed only Christ could head the Church. The accompanying Act of Uniformity established the Book of Common Prayer, blending Protestant doctrine with the retention of certain Catholic-style rituals. When pressed to aggressively hunt down secret Catholics, Elizabeth famously declared she had no desire to make windows into men's souls. This breakthrough moment stabilized England and proved her mastery of statecraft. Elizabeth's 44-year reign was defined by monumental crises and spectacular triumphs, navigated with profound caution. 1569 to 1570, the Northern Rebellion and papal excommunication. Catholic nobles rose up to depose Elizabeth. She crushed the rebellion ruthlessly. In response, Pope Pius V issued a papal bull in 1570, excommunicating Elizabeth, drastically escalating the threat against her life by turning English Catholics into potential traitors in the eyes of the state. February 8, 1587, the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. For 19 years, Elizabeth had kept her Catholic cousin Mary under house arrest. Following the discovery of the Babington plot, which proved Mary's complicity in an assassination attempt against Elizabeth, the Queen agonized over the decision before finally signing the death warrant, eliminating her greatest domestic threat. July-August 1588, the defeat of the Spanish Armada. King Philip II of Spain launched a massive fleet of 130 ships carrying 18,000 soldiers to invade England. Through superior English naval tactics and devastating storms, the invasion was catastrophically defeated. This victory secured England's independence and marked the absolute zenith of Elizabeth's reign. December 31, 1600, the foundation of the East India Company. Elizabeth granted a royal charter establishing a monopoly on trade with the East Indies, laying the institutional groundwork for the future British Empire. Beyond her military victories, Elizabeth I became globally famous for her unparalleled mastery of image-making. She constructed the enduring persona of the Virgin Queen, a monarch wedded entirely to her kingdom. In a patriarchal society that fundamentally believed women were too weak to govern, Elizabeth turned her unmarried status from a political vulnerability into an almost divine mystique. She utilized art and media meticulously. Court painters produced highly stylized, allegorical portraits, portraying her as eternally youthful, draped in pearls, symbolizing purity. During the 1588 Armada crisis, she rode out to her troops at Tilbury, wearing a silver breastplate, and delivered one of the most famous speeches in history. Her fame also rests heavily on the cultural explosion she patronized. The stability of her reign allowed the establishment of permanent public theatres, giving rise to the literary genius of William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe. Elizabeth was a complex paradox of supreme confidence and crippling indecision. Her core motivation was the survival of her sovereignty and the independence of England. Her famous declaration at Tilbury, "I know I have the body but of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king," perfectly encapsulated her working style. She was fiercely intelligent, capable of drafting state papers in Latin and aggressively debating foreign ambassadors. Her greatest political tool was deliberate procrastination. She drove her councillors to despair with her answerless answers, using delayed decisions to keep foreign powers guessing. However, this was a highly calculated tactic in an era where definitive action often meant costly war. While intensely loyal to her closest advisors, like William Cecil, she was notoriously vain, deeply jealous of younger women at court, and prone to explosive temper tantrums. Her religious beliefs leaned toward a conservative Protestantism, but ultimately she valued political conformity far above theological purity. Despite the glowing historical mythology, Elizabeth's reign was plagued by profound failures. The later years of her rule in the 1590s were characterized by severe economic depression, back-to-back harvest failures, and inflation. Her government's reliance on granting monopolies, exclusive rights given to courtiers to sell everyday goods, caused immense public outrage and nearly sparked a parliamentary revolt in 1601. Her foreign policy in Ireland was a bloody failure. The 9 Years' War, 1593 to 1603, drained the English treasury and cost the lives of tens of thousands. English forces employed scorched earth tactics, leading to mass starvation among the Irish populace, a dark legacy historians heavily criticize. Furthermore, her refusal to name a successor created decades of agonizing anxiety. The execution of her former favorite, the Earl of Essex, following his disastrous rebellion in 1601, cast a melancholic shadow over her aging court. The Golden Age was in reality heavily tarnished by poverty and continuous warfare. Elizabeth I's impact on the trajectory of global history is staggering. In the short term, her reign provided the essential stability required for a divided nation to forge a unified Protestant identity. By successfully navigating the treacherous waters between Catholic Spain and France, she preserved English sovereignty during the most volatile century in European history. In the long term, her policies laid the absolute foundation for the British Empire. By patronizing privateers like Francis Drake, she initiated the disruption of the Spanish global monopoly, opening the Atlantic to English exploration, evidenced by the Roanoke colony, situated in land named Virginia in her honor. Culturally, the English language reached an unprecedented height of dramatic maturity. However, her impact also carried negative consequences. Her violent subjugation of Ireland planted seeds of sectarian conflict that lasted centuries, and the voyages she sponsored initiated England's involvement in the transatlantic slave trade under John Hawkins. Today, Queen Elizabeth I is almost universally remembered as one of the greatest monarchs in British history, consistently ranked in public polls as a defining figure of the nation. She died on March 24, 1603, at the age of 69, but her image transitioned from a historical ruler to a massive cultural icon, depicted in dozens of major films and analyzed in thousands of academic volumes. While modern historians have meticulously stripped away the romanticized propaganda of the Gloriana cult, highlighting the severe economic inequality and imperial aggression of her era, her core achievement remains unassailable. The institutions she stabilized, specifically the Church of England, shaped the modern British constitutional framework. The fact that an entire cultural and architectural epoch, the Elizabethan era, bears her name is a testament to the sheer gravity of her historical footprint. The life of Elizabeth I is a masterclass in the terrifying cost of absolute power and the supreme triumph of political survival. Born into a system that declared her legally illegitimate and her gender fundamentally flawed, She weaponized her intellect, her image, and her isolation to dominate a continent of hostile monarchs. She willingly sacrificed personal intimacy, marriage, and motherhood on the altar of her own autonomy, choosing to be married to a nation rather than subjected to a husband. Her 44 years on the throne reveal the profound truth that history is rarely shaped by flawless saints, but rather by pragmatic courage, calculated caution, and the unyielding willpower to endure.